You know, if you look at Silicon Valley, software companies, for instance, they collaborate with competitors to create platforms for their respective value-added services. What competition borders need to be crossed in offshore, in your estimation? You know, how can we get this greater collaboration going, you know? Yeah.
And what I really feel every day is that we have for a long time talked about the collaboration between the supply chain and the customer. But to get it down into the organization, so we really sit down with the engineers early on in the project development and plan better so that we have less waste in the industry. That is really where the huge benefit is.
Peter, your thoughts on
I
this?
actually think the industry is changing, but it came from this mentality of always tendering and then taking the lowest cost. What you see Chevron doing now is coming out and coming with a spec and saying, okay, here's how we want you to do it. But if you have a better idea, by all means, come forward. That didn't exist 12 months ago, 24 months ago. It was our way or the highway. And so the industry is changing.
Martin, and then Martin.
Let me give you an example. When you talk about this borderless business again, we are involved in big projects where the owner might sit in the US, the engineering company might be in the US, but the construction is going on 12, 15 different sites around the world. So for us to be able to handle that and then go where it is assembled in the end, it is a huge task to work together with, for example, Chevron. But we have to handle that together with them, and cooperation is the way to go.
Christian, why don't you jump in here, and then Peter, yeah.
Just a quick comment about the cooperation within the supply chain itself is also important. And here we see that the industry is changing. We see alliances between the different links in the supply chain, linking up, making it possible for them to actually be more effective and reducing costs.
Martin, I know you've been...
I think you're building up a case. I mean, Christian, you said earlier that that what I had to say didn't apply to offshore because it's more complicated. What you're now is describing is a global business where you're competing against local interests and local regulations in a project-driven business where you've got to move very quickly, and a business which is paranoid about quality control. And I think the management of information, the management of decision-making, and the ability to provide that speed of response are all things that you will get if you take the management of the company and the assets to a different level. And therefore, I would argue that far from offshore being inappropriate for this approach, it's actually far more appropriate in many ways because you've got more to get at.
And you're absolutely right about the quality control. The important focus on safety. You know, Silicon Valley, everyone wants to come out, but they throw out a beta version, and then they improve it, and then they improve that, improve that. We can't do that in the offshore side. We have to be perfect from day one. And so the whole question is to attack the cost question. I ask people, what was the price of oil 10 years ago? Most people can't remember. It was $30, $35. And so what happened was the industry's costs got out of control, as you were talking about, Christian. And just as the economists showed us with raw oil material prices, we will drive that cost structure down. And it'll be a combination of all the things that we've talked about. But it's already happening.
Peter Drucker wrote a paper in the 80s in which he said that he will guarantee to any businessman that if they automate, they will save a lot of money, not because of tangible costs, but because suddenly their quality control systems start to work properly because of the feedback loops. And I think that is ultimately the great benefit of this sort of information management.